Shalom, beloveds of the King. Praise Abba Yahuwah. Here we are again, once again, coming together so that we can continue with our Torah portions as the Father continues to unfold His purposes and His plans in everything that He is saying in this hour, as we come to understand a little bit clearer what the Father is saying in this time and what He's revealing. And so today we are looking at Torah portion Kedoshim, and it is this. It's for the set apart ones, for the set apart people, and this is the Torah portion of what He is releasing in His timeline that really has made a lot of sense to me. In terms of where we find ourselves right now, in terms of what we find ourselves in, where the world is heading towards at the moment, and in everything that we see that's going on in the world, and everything that we see that's going on in Eretz Israel, that we can just understand. Because if we look at these Torah portions and we understand the Father's heartbeat, then it's not about what man says and what man thinks and what man is doing. It comes back to what does He say? What does He say? And comes back to what He's doing. So let us pray. Abba Yahuwah, I just want to praise You. I just want to thank You. Thank You, Abba Father, for this opportunity that we have of being able to come together in this timing, in this timeline of where You've got us looking at these Torah portions exactly at a time of when You wanting to reveal them, so that we can understand what it is that You're saying. And my Father, I just want to thank You because You are opening up the mind of our understanding for us to be able to go deeper into Your word, to have the fear of You put within us, for us to understand that You are the one that is speaking. You are the one that is revealing. You are the one that is going to shake the heavens and the earth and everything that is there, in order for us to understand, to come back to Your ways, come back to what Your word says. And this is such a powerful Torah portion of Kedoshim, because You wanting set apart people. You want set apart ones. You want holy people. You want set apart people. And You Yourself said, be set apart as I'm set apart. This is not something that is just, a fragment of our imagination, that we can't be holy. And that's what people tell us. Well, only the Father is holy. No one's allowed to be holy. But yet at the end of the day, it's what You have spoken from the beginning, that You have said. You want holiness. You want set apartness. And so, Abba, my Father, I just want to ask You that You alone will be able to come and open up the mind of Your understanding. Open up these scriptures so that we may know what it is that You are saying in this hour. Not what we think, not what we want, but what You're saying. And that You alone will be able to speak to my mind, speak through my lips, the very oracles that are coming from Your heart. Father, now is not an hour where we want to hear what man's ideas are, what man's interpretation of the Bible is, or what man's opinions are. My opinions do not count at all. At the end of the day, it's Your word that stands, and it's Your word that is truth. And what Your word says is what we are to adhere to, not our own understanding and our own interpretation of the word. And so, Father, I just want to thank You that You alone just open up the scripture to us, for us to be able to understand what it is that You are saying to us in this hour. And so I praise and I thank You for this Torah portion of Kedoshim, in Yeshua's name. Amen. So we are looking at the Torah portion of Kedoshim, and it's from Leviticus chapter 19, verse 1, until Leviticus chapter 20, verse 27. And we will be looking at the Haftorah, the prophets, which some only have it as Amos 9, from verses 7 to 15, but there are many that include Ezekiel 22 to 20. So today we've got a little bit more to read from the prophets, which will really sum up everything for us in terms of what the Father is wanting us to understand in this very Torah portion that we are looking at. And so we are going to start reading in chapter 1, verse 1 from chapter 19, and it says, "And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the congregation of the children of Israel, and say to them, Be set apart, for I, Yahuwah your Elohim, am set apart." Now, that is not something that is saying that is just, you can think about being set apart, or you can decide whether you want to, whether you don't. This is a command. The command is be set apart. And he doesn't only just say it in the foundational covenant, but he says it in the renewed covenant as well, that we are to be set apart, and if we are not set apart, no one's going to see the Father. And so we must understand what it is that he says, and not what it is that, what our opinions are. Because, man has many opinions, and they've taken the Bible and they've made their own doctrines out of their own opinions. And the Father is bringing us back to a place of where it's the truth that sets us free. So let's just look at what his word says in the renewed covenant. And in the renewed covenant it says, "And indeed no discipline seems unpleasant." So we're reading from Hebrews chapter 12 from verse 11. "And indeed no discipline seems pleasant at the time, but grievous. But afterward it yields the peaceable fruit of righteousness to those who have been tainted by it." So the Father allows us to go through. He disciplines us. He disciplines those whom he loves. "So strengthen the hands which hang down and weak knees, and make straight paths for your feet." So you see, the Father wants us to be able to walk on a straight path. It's the straight and narrow path spoken of in Matthew chapter 7, where he says there's a broad way and then there's a narrow way. And we are to walk on the straight path for your feet, lest the lame be turned aside, but instead to be healed. "Pursue peace with all, and pursue apartness, without which no one shall see the Master." So this is in the renewed covenant. If our goal of our walk is not to pursue set apartness, if the goal of our walk, so from the time that we get saved, the Bible tells us that we are to be transformed from glory to glory. The Bible tells us that we are supposed to be becoming holy because he's holy. We are to be becoming set apart because he is set apart. And if this is not the goal of the walk that we're walking out, then we are going to find ourselves not being able to see the Father. Because at the end of the day, the Bible is very clear in what it says. So this thing that we are just to be saved, and it's just salvation, and we're all going to stand before the Father, and it's all just going to be wonderful, that is a fallacy. It's a fallacy. Because here it is very clear, pursue peace with all. So at the end of the day, we will not do our neighbor harm. We are to be at peace. We are to walk at peace with everybody. And pursue apartness, without which no one shall see the Master. So if you are not pursuing set apartness, and you are not allowing the Father to be able to bring his disciplines in you in order to be able to clean you up, you are never going to see the Father. And we are going to understand this, because at the end of the day, we will understand what the Father wants in terms of a set-apart priesthood. And isn't it interesting? Wow, I stand in awe. Because now, this Torah portion would have been the Torah portion of the 20th of October. And that was the very day that when I was sitting at my table, we just entered into Shabbat. And as we just entered into Shabbat, my priest up on my wall, the picture of my priest up on my wall that represents the priesthood that was of the temple, that represents a priest that was lighting a menorah, but the prayer on it was from a 9-candlestick menorah, and it is from the time of Chanukah, and it's actually the prayer prayed 3 times when they light the Chanukiah, which is a 9-candlestick menorah, which is an absolute abomination to the Father, because it's a religious practice that comes directly out of Babylon, that was pagan practices that they have adapted into a religion. And this priest fell to the ground. So isn't it interesting that exactly at the time when this priest fell to the ground, we are doing the Torah portion of Kedoshim. And so what is the Father saying? You see, the changing of the guard, this priesthood, that is everything that is got to do with the religious system and defilement, is going to fall. And I'm going to raise up my priesthood. I'm going to raise up a priesthood that needs to look like me. And I'm going to tell you what are my standards for a priesthood, so that you may understand. It's not what we think. It's not for us to turn around and say, well, I am the bride, I am the priest, I am the one that's going to be able to come and be his priesthood, to be able to stand and be seated with him in heavenly places, and I'm going to reign and rule with him in the millennial reign. No. He's very clear that he's saying pursue peace with all. So at the end of the day, right now, in the land of Israel, peace is not the order of the day. Fighting is the order of the day. Coming up against an enemy is the order of the day. And everybody, instead of them being at peace in their hearts and being able to see things from all perspectives, we are absolutely becoming one-sided in our hearts. And we are actually endorsing what's not peace. And we are being overshadowed by being able to actually border in standing with the people that are wanting to kill people, innocent women and children. When at the end of the day, Father said in Jeremiah chapter 29 from Jeremiah chapter 11 from verses 9 to 11, that there's a conspiracy that's gone on in the land. So let us go back to our scripture, and it says, Leviticus chapter 19 from verse 2, each one of you should fear his mother and his father, and guard my Sabbaths. I am Yahuwah your Lord. So we are actually looking at the 10 Commandments. So basically what the Father is saying, I am going to raise up a priesthood, and this priesthood needs to return back to my 10 Commandments. They need to return back to my Torah ways. So you shall honor your mother and your father. You shall guard my Sabbaths. So Father is laying down his foundations here. He's laying down his commands. And this is the commands that's for a priest. So I'm sorry to say, if you call yourself a Christian and you don't keep the Sabbath, then you are not a priest. You are not set apart unto him. You will not be part of that set apart bride. Because the bride is going to have to do things in his way. We have to be set apart. And this is the Torah portion of what he's saying. This is my standard for set apartness. Do not turn to idols. Do not make for yourselves molded mighty ones. I am Yahuwah your Lord. And so, if you have not had a look at the teachings that I'm busy doing at the moment on Exodus chapter 20, and I'm currently working through each one of these commands. In Exodus chapter 20, I'm going into great lengths and great detail in having to teach these commands. Lining up the commands with the 10 plagues, lining up with the commands, with the 7 days of creation, and understanding these commands in its fullness, so that we will not be found wanting, because we don't really understand what does it mean that you shall have no idols before me. And these idols go a little bit deeper to understanding whoring. If you don't understand whoring, you are not going to understand idolatry. And so do yourself a favor. If you haven't gone and looked at those teachings, now is the hour to start. So because you cannot become a priest if you are not understanding the fullness of these commands, because you could be thinking that you are keeping the commands, but you might find yourself to understand that you're not. So he turns around and he says, so we're busy looking at this, and then he comes to verse 10 and he says, and do not glean your vineyard or gather every grape of your vineyard. Leave them for the poor and the stranger. I am Yahuwah your Lord. Verse 11 says that do not steal, do not lie, do not deceive one another. So there we go again. We are looking now at these commands. That we are not to kill, we are not to steal, we are not to lie, we are not to give false witness. So as we see, he's working through these commands. And then we get to verse 12 and it says, do not swear falsely by my name, nor profane the name of Eloah. So you cannot look at the third command where it says, do not take the name of Yahuwah in vain, without having to look at Leviticus chapter 19 verse 12 that says, and do not swear falsely by my name. And so profane the name of your Eloah. I am Yahuwah. We cannot do that. Because if we are going to be able to look at this, then we have to understand. One says vain, another one says profane. So what does he mean by the word profane? Do not swear falsely by my name. And so profane the name of Eloah. So for us to look at this word profane, it's the word H2455, which is the word chol, which is unholy, profane, common. So don't make his name common. Don't profane it. Don't make it unholy. So we make his name common. This is his name, but we have made his name common by changing his name and bringing it to titles. We've made his name common by bringing it into titles. And we make it unholy. And we have profaned it because now his name is no longer even in our Bibles. We've completely changed it with a title, which we make it common by being able to call the title of what we would call him God. But at the same time, that's the word that we would use for Buddha or Allah or one of these other gods, and then we put him in the same category as that, and therefore we make it common. But let's look at what the word profane means. Profane also comes from the root word, the origin of H2490, which is halal, and that is to defile, to pollute, to desecrate, to defile oneself, to make common, to violate, to dishonor, to violate a covenant, to treat as common, to wound it, to pierce it, to dissolve it, to defile, to stain, to prostitute. I think he's very serious about the fact that we are not to profane his name. And that is why at the end of the day he removed his name from the nations. Why? Because they profaned it. They profaned his name among the nations. So to profane means it is to dissolve it. It means it no longer looks like the original. So they have profaned his name by taking the name of Yahuwah and they have given it a title of Lord and God. But it goes a little bit deeper. It means it no longer looks like the original. It's like if you put sugar or salt into water. You don't have water anymore. It alters the taste of the water. You don't recognize it as being water. It's now either salt salty or it's either sweet. And therefore you make it common, like Lord and God makes his name common, because it's what you use. Lord is what you use even for a human being. Lord so-and-so. But at the same time, you also profane it if you are going to make his name, to dissolve the character of that name. So listen. So where we bring our doctrines of demons, so we make his name common, where we bring our doctrines of demons, where the truth of Yahuwah's word is mixed with lies, it is to profane it. It is to defile it. So the word to defile is the word from H2930, and that's tamei. That's the word tamei. And that is to be unclean, become impure, to defile, to pollute, to contaminate our lives. We need to be set apart in the character of that name. How can we be unclean? So if we are unclean, where we don't walk out his ways, where we say that we are a believer, yet we don't walk in his ways, then we're not able to speak that name, because it is a set-apart name. Otherwise, we defile it. If we defile the name, we will be unclean. You cannot take the name upon your lips and yet continue in what he says is unclean, because to defile is to make it unclean. You must come into covenant first. Come into Yahuwah's ways and his truth. Then we reveal the name. If you don't get restored, you will defile and profane the name. If you don't come back to being set apart in the covenant that he has made with us, because this is what they did in the scriptures. They were using the name, but they were still polluted. They were unclean, and they defiled his name. They were still filled with self and the flesh. We need to understand what he says is unclean. So, let's have a look at Ezekiel chapter 22. No, let's look at Ezekiel chapter 36. Ezekiel chapter 36 verses 20 to 23, and he says, "And when they came to the nations, wherever they went, they profaned my set-apart name, for it was said of them, these are the people of Yahuwah, and yet they have gone out of his land. But I had compassion on my set-apart name, which the house of Israel has profaned among the nations wherever they went." Why did they profane it? Because they dissolved the name of Yahuwah by acting in a way that was not of his character. They did not uphold him. They did not behave like his children. They did not do the things that they were supposed to do as a set-apart people unto him. "Therefore say to the house of Israel, thus says the Master Yahuwah, I do not do this for your sake, O house of Israel, but for my set-apart name's sake, which you have profaned among the nations wherever you went. And I shall set apart my great name, which has been profaned among the nations, which you have profaned in their midst. And the nation shall know that I am Yahuwah, declares Yahuwah, when I am set apart in you before their eyes." So you see, if you do not walk out that set apart walk, so that they may see that set apart walk of your life, then you uphold his name. And then he's being able to be seen. Let's look at Ezekiel 39, verse 7. "And I shall make my set-apart name known in the midst of the people Israel, and not let my set-apart name be profaned. Now, quite honestly, in the land of Israel right now, his set-apart name is not even known, and that is why they don't use the set-apart name, and that is why they are not set-apart people, because they're not using the set-apart name, and they are not able to use the set-apart name because they are not set apart unto him, because they would just continue to profane his name. And that is why if people are saying that is his people, then that means that he tolerates everything that is allowed in that land, which means he tolerates adultery, he tolerates idolatry, he tolerates, because we saw the idolatry that went on there, he tolerates abortion, he tolerates homosexuality, he tolerates the killing that is going on at the moment, he tolerates everything that is being done there at the moment. And the nation shall know that I am Yahuwah, the set-apart one of Israel. So he shall make his name known in the midst of my people Israel. So the true people of Israel will not profane his name, but they will uphold his name, and everybody will know who he is through those people by the way that they live. So let's have a look at Ezekiel 20. This is going to be part of our, but we're not going to get there. So no, we'll read it then at the end. Let's have a look, and now we carry on with Leviticus chapter 19, verses 13 to 19, and it says, "Do no unrighteousness in right ruling. Do not be partial to the poor or favor the face of the great, but rightly rule your neighbor in righteousness." So we are to rule our neighbor in righteousness. Do not go slandering among your people. Do not stand against the blood of your neighbor. I am Yahuwah. How much slandering gets done in amongst the believers today? How much slandering? Do not hate your brother in your heart. Reprove your neighbor for certain, and bear no sin because of him. So we are to rebuke, we are to correct. We are to reprove our neighbor. So if our neighbor does something, we are to go and reprove him. We are to tell our neighbor. We are not to slander our neighbor behind our neighbor's back. So if you've got a problem with somebody, rather tell them to their face that you've got a problem with them. Don't go tell the whole world. Be man or woman enough to be able to go to that person and say, look, you know what you're doing is just not right. You don't need to do it behind their back, because that is slandering. And then he's telling you what a priest should not do. If you are set apart to the Father, you do not do this. And then he says, guard my laws. Do not let your livestock mate with another kind. Do not sow your field with mixed seed. And do not put garments woven of two sorts of threaded upon you. So, at the end of the day, this is all the mixed seed that is being given to us in this day. And so it's becoming very difficult in this day and age that we live in order to be able to understand that the Father has said. That's why he said, do not mix wool and linen. But everything of what people are doing today is everything of bringing the mixed seed. And the mixed seed is that they are even mixing the plants. Like they will take a lemon tree and then mix it with an orange tree and birth a new kind of breed of fruit. And so it is. This is just what man is doing. Leviticus 19 from verses 26 to 28, and it says, do not eat meat with blood. Do not practice divination or magic. Do not round the corners of your head, nor destroy the corner of your beard. And do not make cuttings in your flesh for the dead, nor put tattoo marks on you. I am Yahuwah. So, once again, he's telling us not to eat meat that's got blood in it. And yet, how many people will like their meat still rare and not well done? They like to cut their meat and the blood is still running out of it. We are not to eat any blood. And then he says, do not round the corners of your head, nor destroy the corners of your beard. So we are not to be able to go and shave the sides of our beard, shave the sides of our head, and have this Mohican type hairstyle, and this like shaved on the sides of the head, and then the hair at the top long, and then have our beard where you're going to shave the sides of your beard and you only leave this little section of hair in the middle, that in Afrikaans language it says it's a bokbaartjie, which makes it look like the beard of a goat. Now interesting, the goat is of, the devil is seen as this goat. And yet it's the goat that has this little like, you know, when the men shave the sides of their beard and then they just leave over here this little bit of, you know, beard. He's telling us not to do it according to Torah. So if we are sitting over there and we are saying that we got to keep the Sabbath and we got to do all of this, but a man is still doing this, then what is the point of him keeping all the other things and yet he doesn't keep this? And then it says, do not tattoo your body, not even for the dead. How many people are cutting themselves? They don't necessarily cut themselves, but they tattoo themselves for the dead. I mean, I was just watching the other day one of the young girls that died in that concert that they were at in the desert in Israel. And then the father and the brother went and put the tattoo now of the girl because she liked music. They've gone and put a musical thing on their arms. And you see, everything is just to defy what the Bible says, because at the end of the day, we don't read the Bible and what is written there. And so now all these believers, all these Christians now, because they don't read the foundational covenant either, because they say it's all been done away with, now they go around just tattooing their bodies and they put scriptures on and think it's so holy because now I've got a big scripture. Now I become a comic book. Or I become my Bible on my hand or on my arm or whatever, because now I'm going to go around tattooing my body. When the Bible clearly tells you that you are not to tattoo your body, because your body is not your own. It's a temple of Yahuwah. Leviticus chapter 19 verses 29, and it says, do not profane your daughter by making her a whore, so that the land does not whore, and the land becomes filled with wickedness. Now in the land of Israel, they've allowed a lot of the Russian girls, a lot of the Russians in, and now all of a sudden the land is filled with prostitution, that there's so much of these Russian girls that are prostitutes. Prostitution is rife in the land of Israel. But you see, then we sit and we say we stand with the nation, but the nation does everything that is an abomination to the Father. If you walk on the streets of Tel Aviv, I think that's the place where I saw the most tattoos from all the places, is in Tel Aviv. Or if you walk in Eilat, it's just tattoos everywhere you look. Why? Because at the end of the day, they don't follow Torah. They don't keep ways of Torah. And then he says in verse 30, guard my Sabbaths and reverence my set-apart place. I am Yahuwah. Again, he tells you to guard his Sabbaths. So his Sabbaths are important, that we are to keep them. And then verse 33 says, and when a stranger sojourns with you in your land, do not oppress him. Well, right now, those sojourners in the land of Israel that are known to be what people would say now are Palestinians, or the Arabs that are sojourning in the land. So even if they've taken over their land, that that we understand that the land is the Father's land. It was the Father's land from the beginning. And now they're taking back the land. A Zionist state has been formulated. And they've taken over the land. They are not to oppress the sojourner. Nor are they to oppress the believers either. But this is exactly what we see going on in the land. And that's why we've got to see. We've got to see exactly what the Father's saying. So this unholy priesthood that is there at the moment, this unholy priesthood that has been presented to us, be it in a church, be it in Judaism, all this man-made religions are going to fall. Because a whole unholy priesthood is going to fall. Then we read verse 37, and it says, "And you shall guard all my laws and all my right rulings and do them. I am Yahuwah." So the Father is telling them again, you shall guard all my laws and all my right rulings and do them. I am Yahuwah. So we are to guard what He tells us to guard. This is what we've got to understand. So, we look at Leviticus chapter 20, and we are going to read from verses 7 to 8. And it says, "And you shall set yourselves apart, and you shall be set apart, for I am Yahuwah, your Eloah. And you shall guard my laws and do them. I am Yahuwah, who set you apart." So, we shall set ourselves apart because He is set apart. And we shall do them. Now, in 1 Peter chapter 1, we've already read in Hebrews chapter 12 that He says, be set apart as I am set apart. And if we do not set ourselves apart, then and pursue peace and pursue set apartness, no one is going to see the Father. And that's what we've got to understand. No one is going to see the Father if we are not going to set ourselves apart. Now in 1 Peter chapter 13, and it turns around and it says, 1 Peter 1 from verse 13 says, "Therefore, having girded up the loins of your mind, being sober, set your expectation perfectly upon the favor, the grace." That word favor is grace. That is to be brought to you at the revelation of Messiah Yahushua. As obedient children, not conforming yourselves to the former lusts in your ignorance. Instead, as the one who called you is set apart, so the one who called us is set apart. We gave our lives to Messiah Yahushua. He's the one who called us. And as He set apart, instead, as the one who called you is set apart, so also should become set apart in all behavior. So all our behavior needs to become set apart, because it has been written, be set apart, for I am set apart. So understand, we are to be set apart because He is set apart. And if we call on the Father, who without partiality judges according to each one's work, pass the time of your sojourning in fear. So see, I truly believe the thing that is the most lacking in the world right now is the fear of Yahuwah. But the Father has said He's going to make His fear known to the people so that they can fear Him and come back to Him. Knowing that you were redeemed from your futile behavior inherited from your father, not with what is corruptible, silver or gold, but with the precious blood of Messiah, as of a lamb, unblemished and spotless, foreknown indeed before the foundations of the world, but manifested in these last times for your sakes, who through Him believed in Eloah, who raised Him from the dead and gave Him esteem, so that your belief and expectation are in Eloah. Now that you have cleansed your lives in obeying the truth through the Spirit to unfeigned brotherly love, love one another fervently with a clean heart. And this is what we need to understand, because we are going to understand that the commands are going to be summed up in the two commands. Love Abba Yahuwah with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Which here is going to be the foundation of everything, because when we understand these commands, we will walk out as Yahushua leads us. That we will cleanse our lives as He's going to be able to walk with us and set us apart. Leviticus chapter 20 verse 13. And it says, and a man who lies with a male, as he lies with a woman, both of them are done an abomination. They shall certainly be put to death. Their blood is upon them. Now, what exactly is going on in the land of Israel right now? Where Tel Aviv is known as the gay capital of the world, where through the streets of Jerusalem itself, Jerusalem, that's supposed to be Father's, where He's put His name. See, you have profaned yourself among the nations. You have profaned my holy name. The name that He inscribed His name on the city of Jerusalem, that He's put His shin on that city. And this is the very city where they will march through the streets as whores, sluts. They will march through the streets as homosexuals and demand their rights, and they have the right. And no one stops it because it's allowed. And yet the Father said that certainly they will be put to death, and their blood is upon them. So we don't understand what all was going on in that concert. How many homosexuals were there? What all was going on there, because it was one of these peace rallies of this new age where it's the love, love, all goes. So in Leviticus chapter 22, from verses 22 to 26, and it says, and you shall guard all my laws and all my right rulings and do them, so that the land where I am bringing you to dwell does not vomit you out. That's what we read last week in Leviticus chapter 18, when he said, if you do what the nations have done before, the land vomited them out, and the land is going to vomit you out. That he says, and you shall guard all my laws and all my right rulings and do them, so that the land where I am bringing you to dwell does not vomit you out. The land of Israel is going to vomit many people out if they're going to continue in the wicked way that they are walking at the moment. And so we've got to understand, as the state has been formulated and the Father has allowed what has happened, but now the people have a choice to either return back to Him and to what the truth is of this word, or else, if you want to put yourself in a land that has already got all the promises that go with it, you will be vomited out of the land. And do not walk in the laws of the nation which I am driving out before you, for they do all these, and therefore I loathed them. So if the Father loathes those that have done all these abominations, how is He going to accept it with His people? But I say to you, you are going to possess their land, and I myself give it to you to possess it, a land flowing with milk and honey. I am Yahuwah your Elohim, who has separated you from the people. And you shall make a distinction between clean beasts and unclean, and between unclean birds and clean. And do not make yourselves abominable by beast or by bird, or whatever creeps in the ground, which I have separated from you as unclean. And so in that land, as the Russians have come in, they have their Russian delis. And in their Russian delis, they have all their pork delicacies. all the pork delicacies that they want to be able to have. They have all their prawns. They have all the things that they've taken out of the nations that was unclean. And now they've let these people come into the land. And so the land has been defiled with all their pork products and everything else that goes with it. And you shall be set apart to me, for I am set apart and have separated you from the peoples to be mine. So you are to be his, and you will only be his if you are truly walking set apart unto him and keeping his ways, because this is what he has said. He wants a set apart people that are walking set apart unto him. So if we do not keep his ways, the land will vomit us out. But if we continue to say that the land of Israel is the land of the Bible, that this is the promised land, which we know that whole territory was the land of promise. But the land of promise comes with conditions. And those were the conditions that was already given to the Israelites then, which is going to be the conditions they're going to have to adhere to now. And if they do not adhere to these conditions, the land is going to vomit them out. Because he's going to make a distinguish between what is good and what is evil. Let's go and read Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5 from verses 43. It says, you heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. So this is exactly where we are. If you look at where they are in the land of Israel right now, they love their neighbor, that they're supposed to love their neighbor, and some of their neighbors are not necessarily Jews, and hate your enemy. So they are hating their enemy. And this is what we're standing with. But what did Yeshua say to us as believers? He said to us as believers, but I say to you, love your enemies, bless those cursing you, do good to those hating you, and pray for those insulting you and persecuting you. Now that is what we're supposed to do. We can't look at a bunch of people and say, well, that is evil, and we will just say, annihilate them all. That's our flesh. Yeshua died for all those people. Yahushua has died for every single person on the face of this earth, good or bad. And our job as intercessors is to pray for them, not to annihilate them before the time that they've even had an opportunity to receive Yahushua. So that you become sons of your Father in the heavens, because he makes his sun rise on the wicked and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous and on the unrighteous. For if you love those loving you, what reward have you? Are the tax collectors not doing the same? And if you greet your brothers only, what do you do more than others? Are the tax collectors not doing so? Therefore, be perfect, as your Father in heaven is perfect. So we are expected to be perfect, to be set apart as our Father in heaven is. We look at Matthew chapter 22. Matthew chapter 22 verses 36 to 40. Teacher, which is the great command in the Torah? And Yeshua said to him, you shall love Yahuwah your Elohim with all your heart, with all your being, and with all your mind. So we are to love Abba Yahuwah with all our heart, with all our being, and with all our mind. This is the first and greatest command, and the great command. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. So, Leviticus 19 verses 18, let's just see. Leviticus 19 verses 18 says, "Do not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the children of your people, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am Yahuwah." So we are to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. If you don't love yourself, you are not going to love your neighbor. And so he turns around and he says, "On these two commands hang all the Torah and the prophets." And so we've got to understand that he is laying for us that we need to be able to follow Yahushua. Now, the first 4 commands have everything to do with loving Abba Yahuwah, because he says that you shall shema, you shall obey him, you shall have no other idols before him, you shall not take his name in vain, meaning you are to uphold the character of that name, and you should restore his name, and you should not bring his name to become common. And then you should keep the Sabbath holy. All 4 of those are what you do for him to show him you love him. The other 6 have everything to do with your neighbor. Has to do, you shall not steal, you shall not kill, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not bear false witness, you shall not covet your neighbor's goods. The other 6 have to do with the neighbor. So at the end of the day, we are to understand as we are walking out these commands, we are to understand what the Father is laying the foundation for us. Romans 13, from verses 8 to 14. Let's go look at Romans. Romans 13 from verses 8 to 14 says, "Owe no man any matter except to love one another. For he who loves another has filled the Torah. And how no greater love is there than for one to lay down his life for a brother. But we have become such selfish beings that we're not willing to lay down our life for anybody, because our life becomes about me, myself, and I. For this you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, you shall not covet, and if there is any other command, it is summed up in this word, you shall love your neighbor as yourself." There you go. He's summing up those commands that's got to do with the neighbor. So, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, you shall not covet your neighbor's goods. All of these and you shall honor your mother and your father. All of these has to do with a neighbor. Love does no evil to a neighbor. Love will not bring the character of a neighbor down. Love will not speak up against a brother to be able to come and defile a brother, to slander, to murder with a mouth. I tell you, if there's one thing that I've asked the Father to put the fear of Yahuwah in me, is in this area, because it was so easy for me to do this, because I get so persecuted. I'm always being persecuted. So it's so easy so that when I'm receiving this persecution, that I just want to have this tendency to want to be able to come and speak about this, the problem that is at hand. And then want to bring that person into a bad light. But I have to understand that persecution is part of my walk. And I am to understand that Father will use many, many things in my life to be able to shape me and mold me in what He wants me to be and who He wants me to be. And so therefore, I have no right to be able to go and get upset with my neighbor and now want to slander my neighbor. And so I'm really, really at a place of where I'm just asking the Father to help me. That I am to embrace whatever it is that the Father brings my way that my flesh might not really like. And I've asked Him to put His fear in me so that I don't go down this road, because it's so easy to do it. And now I find myself around people that when they're doing this, I say to them, you know what? At the end of the day, it's not right what you are doing and what you are saying. So we got to walk very circumspectly before the Father, and I'm asking Him to judge me, lest I be judged. Let me judge myself. Let me come and let Him help me to correct those areas in me that have been a stumbling block for myself. And that's why I ask Him, work it in me, Abba Yahuwah, both to will and to do your good pleasure. I desire to be able to have my mouth that can speak life, that is not going to be able to slander, because I've done this far too much in my life already and I don't want to do it anymore. And may the fear of Yahuwah be upon me to stop something that is evil. And so He says, we were looking at Rome until verse 14. Love does no evil to a neighbor, therefore love is completion of Torah. Do this, knowing the time that it is already the hour of us to wake up from sleep. For now our deliverance is nearer than when we did believe. The night is far advanced, the day has come near. So let us put off the works of darkness, and let us put on the armor of light. Let us walk becomingly as in the day, not in wild parties and drunkenness, not in living together and indecencies, not in fighting and envy, but put on Master Yahushua Messiah, and make no provision for the lusts of the flesh. So we can't talk about the lusts of the flesh and not have a look at the lusts of the flesh. So let's go and see, what are these lusts of the flesh that we are supposed to be crucifying in our lives, these lusts of the flesh. So we're going to read from Galatians chapter 5 from verses 13 to 26. And it says, For you, brothers, have been called to freedom. Only do not use freedom as an occasion for the flesh, but through love serve one another. So we are to serve one another out of love. For the entire Torah is completed in one word, in this: you should love your neighbor as yourself. And if you bite and devour one another, beware lest you be consumed by one another. So be careful that we do not bite one another. Be careful that we do not devour one another. Yes, if the Father has revealed something, and you are to speak to the person because He's revealed something, then that is what you do. Go to your brother. Go speak to your brother. Don't speak behind your brother's back what you would not say to his face. If you say it to his face, you can speak it behind his back, because you've already said it to his face. But don't do that. Don't slander. And whatever it is that has happened, don't now go and make a big thing out of it and bring destruction on your brother. And I say, walk in the Spirit, and you shall not accomplish the lusts of the flesh. For the flesh lusts after the Spirit. Now, the flesh lusts against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. And these are opposed to each other, so that you do not do what you desire to do. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the Torah. Why? You walk out Torah. You don't need to have Torah judge you because you walk out the Torah. It's not that the Torah is done away with. It's the fact that the Torah doesn't judge you because the Torah is there as a pointer to show you where you go wrong. But when you are walking out what Torah says, then the Torah doesn't judge you. And the works of the flesh are well known, which are these: adultery, whoring, uncleanness, indecency, idolatry, drug sorcery, hatred, quarrels, jealousies, fits of rage, selfish ambitions, dissensions, factions, envy, murders, drunkenness, wild parties, and the like, of which I forewarn you, even as I also said before, that those who practice such as these shall not inherit the reign of Eloah. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, trustworthiness, gentleness, self-control. Against such there is no Torah. Why? Because the Torah was there to be able to bring all these things in order for us to be able to understand that we are to adhere to it. But if we're walking out Torah, then the Torah is not judging us. And those who are of Messiah have impelled the flesh with its passions and the desires. If we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. Let us not become conceited, provoking one another, envying one another. So, this is what the Father says. We are not to envy one another. We are not to provoke one another. So, we're going to have a look at our Haftorah. Let's look at our Haftorah in Ezekiel chapter 20. And we are going to read from verse 3. Son of man, speak to the elders of Israel and say to them, thus says the Master Yahuwah, have you come to inquire of me? See, this is where we are right now. People are very quick to declare Scripture, to quote Scripture, to hold Scripture up to the Father. But they've never really come and sat down and asked Him, what is He doing? What is He saying? Our prayers become centered of when we sit there and we demand and we command from the Father. But do we really come? This was the prophetic word that He gave me on Shabbat, 2 Shabbats ago, not the Shabbat previously. That He says everybody comes, but nobody really comes and seeks me and asks me, what am I saying about what's going on in Israel? What am I saying in the time that we find ourselves in? And so He says, say to them, thus says the Master Yahuwah, have you come to inquire of me? As I live, I'm not being inquired of by you, declares the Master Yahuwah. So see, is anybody really inquiring of Him? Or do we just come to Him with our own doctrines of our own understanding? And with our own doctrines of our own understanding, we quote Scripture before Him and say, this is what you've got to do. This is what you've got to do. This is what you've got to do. Judge them, Son of Man. Judge them. Make known to them the abominations of their fathers. So you see, Father will raise up the prophet that's going to have to speak His word. And His word is a word of judgment. And you shall say to them, thus says Yahuwah the Master, thus is the Master Yahuwah, on the day when I chose Israel and lifted my hand. Now you need to hear very clearly what is being written of here. Because what is written of here is a direct word for what the Father is speaking to Israel right now. On the day when I chose Israel and lifted my hand in an oath to the seed of the house of Yaakov, and made myself known to them in the land of Mitzrayim, I lifted my hand in an oath to them, saying, I am Yahuwah your Eloah. On that day I lifted up my hand in an oath to them to bring them out of the land of Mitzrayim into a land that I had searched out for them, flowing with milk and honey and the splendor of lands. And I said to them, now listen to what He said to them. This is what He says. This is not what goes on. This is what He says. And what He says is set in stone. And nobody's going to change what He said. Each one of you Throw away the abominations which are before his eyes, and do not defile yourselves with the idols of Mitzrayim. I am Yahuwah your Lord. But they rebelled against me and would not obey me. All of them did not throw away the abominations which were before their eyes, nor did they forsake the idols of Mitzrayim. So I resolved to pour out my wrath on them, to complete my displeasure against them in the midst of the land of Mitzrayim. But I acted for my name's sake, that it should not be profaned before the eyes of the nations, among whom they were before. Those eyes I had made myself known to them, to bring them out of the land of Mitzrayim. So I took them out of the land of Mitzrayim, and I brought them into the wilderness. And I gave them my laws, and showed them my right rulings, which if a man does, he shall live by them. But I also gave them my Sabbaths, to be a sign between me and them, to know that I am Yahuwah, who sets them apart. But the house of Israel rebelled against me in the wilderness. They did not walk in my laws, and they rejected my right rulings, which if a man does, he shall live by them. And they greatly profaned my Sabbaths. So there you see, they have dissolved these Sabbaths. In the land of Israel, the city of Tel Aviv has said, we will not keep the law of the land to keep the Sabbath. We will run our buses, we will have our shops open, we will do our things. We have excluded ourselves from the rest of the land. Then I said, I would pour out my wrath on them in the wilderness to consume them. But I acted for my name's sake, not to profane it before the nations, before whose eyes I had brought them out. And I myself also lifted my hand in an oath to them in the wilderness, not to bring them into the land which I had given them, flowing with milk and honey, the splendor of all lands, because they rejected my right ruling and did not walk in my laws, and they profaned my Sabbaths, for their heart went after their idols. And my eye pardoned them from destroying them, and I did not make an end of them in the wilderness. And I said to their children in the wilderness, do not walk in the laws of your fathers, nor observe their rulings, nor defile yourselves with their idols. I am Yahuwah, Eloah. Walk in my laws, and guard my right rulings, and do them, and set apart my Sabbaths, and they shall be a sign between me and you, to know that I am Yahuwah your Lord. Have they set apart his Sabbaths in that land? This was not just a Sabbath, it was a high holy Sabbath. And how many people had set it apart? And so we've got to understand that the Father is the one who's going to do what needs to be done. In verse 39 of Ezekiel chapter 20, verse 39, it says, as for you, O house of Israel, thus said the Master, go serve each one of you his idols, and afterwards, if you are not listening to me, but do not profane my set-apart name any more with your gifts and your idols. So, understand something. This is what is going on. They have profaned his name once again, as it was with them in the wilderness, with them when they came into the land, and then he brought them into exile. He exiled them. Then he destroyed the temple, and they got mixed. They lost their way. And Yahushua is the one who said, I will gather you from among the nations. I will be the one to be able to bring if we're really going to go look at it, let's just look at Amos chapter 9. And then we're going to look at these scriptures. So this is the word, prophetic word, that the Father is speaking right now. If we are going to be his priests, his set apart ones, we cannot continue to act like it was when we were in Mitzrayim. We come out of Mitzrayim. We are not to profane his Sabbaths. We are to walk in his ways and his right rulings. We are to do them. We are to walk in them. Let's go look at Amos. Amos 9, verses 7 to 15. Are you not like the people of Cush? Are you not like the people of Cush to me, O children of Israel, declares Yahuwah? Did I not bring you up, Israel, from the land of Mitzrayim, and the Philistines from Kaftor, and Aram from Kir? Look, the eyes of the Master Yahuwah are on the sinful reign, and I shall destroy it from the face of the earth, except that I do not completely destroy the house of Yaakov, declares Yahuwah. So he will have for himself a remnant. For look, I am commanding, and I shall sift the house of Israel among all the nations, as one sifts with a sieve. Yet not a grain falls to the ground. All sinners of my people are going to die. Now, this is a prophetic word. On the 20th of October, my priest fell to the ground with an unholy, everything that it stood for, fell to the ground. And he says, all sinners of my people are going to die by the sword. Those who are saying, evil does not overtake us nor meet us. So, for all those that are saying, but understand something, this is Father's holy land, this is Father's holy people, and He's going to protect them. So we are saying to Him that He's okay, yet He never, He did not allow them to enter His promised land. He destroyed them in the wilderness. He destroyed them when they had to go into Babylon because they did not keep what they were supposed to keep in the land. But now we will say that no, in that day, those who are saying evil does not overtake us nor meet us. So evil's not going to overtake us nor meet us, because why? We haven't done anything wrong. What kind of Father do we serve? So He destroyed them all in the wilderness because they didn't keep His way, because they did not adhere to His commands or keep His way. That was the promises, that was the order for them to enter into the promised land. He exiled them because they didn't keep His way. And now He's going to say, it's okay, you can just do everything, because you know what, it's fine. I'm just going to overlook everything. Listen to what He says. All the sinners of my people are going to die by the sword. Those who are saying evil does not overtake us nor meet us. In that day I shall raise up the booth of David, which has fallen down, and I shall repair its bridges and raise up its ruins, and I shall build it as in the days of old, so that they possess the remnant of Edom and all the nations on whom my name is called, declares Yahuwah, who does this. So understand, the Father knows He's going to gather us all out of the nations, all those who His name is put upon. Look, the days are coming, declares Yahuwah, that the plowman shall overtake the reaper, and the treader of grapes him who sows seed. And the mountains shall drip new wine, and all the hills melt. And I shall turn back the captivity of my people Israel, and they shall build the waste cities and inhabit them. And they shall plant vineyards and drink wine from them, and shall make gardens and eat their fruit. So you see, when they're going to build the fallen tent of David, when they will be restored, not just when we think it's going to be done. And I plant them on their own soil. I plant them on their own soil, and not uproot them anymore from their own soil. I've given them, says Yahuwah, your Lord. And so if we look at Jeremiah chapter 32, this is the promise that the Father has said in Jeremiah chapter 32. In Jeremiah chapter 32, from verse 37, it says, see, I am gathering them out of all the lands where I have driven them in my displeasure and in my wrath and in the great rage, and I will bring them back to this place. So this is when the Father is going to bring them back to this place, and I shall let them dwell in safety. Israel has not dwelt in safety since the day it became a nation. So how can we say that it was the Father gathering all these tribes? And they shall be my people, and I shall be their Lord. And I shall give them one heart and one way to fear me all the days, for the good of them and for their children after them. And I shall make an everlasting covenant with them, that I do not turn back from doing good to them. And I shall put my fear in their hearts, so as to not turn aside from me, so that they do not turn aside from me. And I shall rejoice over them, to do good to them, and shall plant them in this land in truth. So they need to be planted in that land in truth. And right now, I don't see any of this being fulfilled. This is not the land of the fulfillment of the promises of where people are declaring Ezekiel 37 and Ezekiel 36 and these scriptures. Because these scriptures is not what is being, it's not for this time. This is the millennial reign. And all my heart with all my being, and with all my heart and with all my being. And so if we have a look at Isaiah chapter 14 verse 1. No, let's look first at Jeremiah chapter 30. Let's look at Jeremiah chapter 30 verse 10. And you, do not fear, O Yaakov, my servant, declares Yahuwah, nor be discouraged, O Israel. For look, I am saving you from afar, and your seed from the land of their captivity. And Yaakov shall return, and have rest, and be at ease, with no one to trouble him. For I am with you, declares Yahuwah, to save you. Though I make a complete end of all nations where I have scattered you, yet I do not make a complete end of you, but I shall reprove you in judgment, and by no means leave you unpunished. So, in verse 30, verse 10, he's saying, do not fear, O Yaakov, for I'm saving you from afar, and your seed from a land of their captivity, and Yaakov shall return and have rest and be at ease. Where is the land of Israel ever been at rest and at ease? It has never had that. But these are the promises that's supposed to be for the promises that they are quoting to declare their scriptures. So we are going to close off with Acts chapter 15 so that we can understand what the Father is busy doing. In Acts chapter 15, this is what he says from verses 14. And this is the promise that was given by Messiah Yahushua. Shimon has declared how Eloah first visited the nations to take out of them a people for his name. So you see, the Father is the one who's going to raise up a people. And these will be the people that he will take for his name. So he's not going to just gather people out that don't walk according to his purposes, according to his ways, and then all of a sudden they are being told that they are the people of Yahuwah. He says, has declared that Eloah first visited the nations to take out of them a people for his name. So amongst the nations, he's going to take out a people that's going to be for his name, which means they're not all Jews. They are going to be the Gentiles too. Why? Because they're returning back to the truth of his word, and they have received Messiah Yahushua. And the words of the prophets agree with this, as it has been written, after this I shall return and rebuild the booth of David, which has fallen down, and I shall rebuild its ruins, and I shall set it up, so that the remnant of mankind shall seek Yahuwah. So you see, the remnant of mankind, who are his true Yehudim? Those who have circumcised their hearts and their flesh, not just circumcised their flesh. even the nations on whom my name has been called, so even those who are in the nations where his name is upon them, says Yahuwah, who is doing this, who has made this known from of old. So, understand something. This is the message. The fallen tent of David is going to raise up, and we are going to become the tabernacle that carries his presence. And we will be the set-apart remnant, and we are the holy priesthood that is being set apart for him. He wants to reign in a temple not made of man's hands. He wants to reign within us, and we will become his holy temple. So he says, therefore I judge that we should not trouble those from among the nations who are turning to Eloah, but that we write to them to abstain from defilement of idols and from whoring, and from what is strangled and from blood. And now listen, Moshe is being preached in the places where these people are coming to become believers. So Moshe has to be preached in order for us to return back to the ways of the Father. From ancient generations, Moshe has in every city those proclaiming him being read in the congregations every Sabbath. So as long as the Torah is being read, people are coming back to ways of Torah, which is what was supposed to have been done with the nations. Not just go build another church, another religion, and call it Christianity, and totally void of the preaching that is going on, that's been given to us of the readings that comes from the Torah, because we've got to receive the Torah to be able to have our foundation. So praise Abba Yahuwah. That's why everything that is not of him will fall to the ground, and he's raising up his remnant bride that will walk in spirit and truth. The two witnesses, the Spirit, Elijah, the truth, Moshe, the foundations of our Torah by the Spirit. Let us pray. Abba Yahuwah, I just want to praise you and I just want to thank you. I thank you for your word, my Father. I thank you for this powerful word that you are giving us of Kedoshim, that we will understand what it means to really be set apart, that we will start to understand that we are to walk your purposes and your plans. Your purposes and your plans will prevail. Your word is truth. We cannot say that we put you in our box and want to pray our prayers and you are to answer. Your word is the truth, not our opinions, not our mindsets, nor our religious doctrines. But your word is the truth, and your truth will stand to the time that you come. Until you come, my Father, I pray, set apart a holy remnant, a priesthood that is to be able to walk set apart before you. In Yeshua's name, Amen.